Welcome to the third video in this series of managerial accounting and preparing the budget. In this video, we are going to review the third step of the budget process, which is completing the manufacturing budget. Now, there are three parts to the manufacturing budget. This particular video is going to focus on the raw materials budget. So up to this point, you have completed your sales budget, and from that you completed your production budget. Now you will recall when you completed the production budget, you determined that you would need to complete or produce 16,600 units in the month of July. I'll let you in on a little hint. As you prepare the manufacturing budget, that is always going to be your production budget units. When you do the raw material budget, when you prepare the direct labor budget for July, and when you prepare the factory overhead budget for July, you will always use that same number of units to be produced for July. So having said that, I'm just going to go ahead right now and I'm going to enter 16,600 units to be produced in July. Now, my next line says materials requirement per unit. So this is where I have to go back over to my assumptions and my instructions, and I have to review those and become familiar. And here we see that we need to consider assumption 4 when we're doing the completing the raw materials. It tells us that our June 30th raw materials inventory was an actual of 4,600 units. And it also tells us that the budgeted September 30th raw materials is 1,980 units. Raw materials cost is $7.75 per unit, and each finished unit requires 0.50 units of raw materials. And then it also tells us what company policy calls for in this particular budget, just like it did in the production budget. Okay. So here we see materials requirement per unit. That's given to us. It's 0.50. So we're going to enter that into our spreadsheet. And again, here you see how it has the little line under the 0.5. That tells us that we need to do some sort of a mathematical function. And here we're going to perform multiplication, because we're going to take the number of units and we're going to multiply it by the materials requirement per unit. So I'm simply going to multiply the 16,600 by the 0.50, and I see that materials needed for production is a total of 8,300. Okay. Now I'm going to go and add my budgeted ending inventory. Well, what does it tell me about budgeted ending inventory? It tells me that budgeted ending inventory has to be 20% of the next month's material requirements. Well, it tells me that, let's see. Now it tells us that the next month's we need to add the budgeted ending inventory, and at this point you may not have calculated the next month's materials needed, so I'm just going to kind of give you a little bit of a hint here. When you calculate this in your production budget, you're going to find that your August units are 20,600, and again, it's the same concept, 50%, which means that for the next month, it's going to be, your requirement is 10,300. So in order to calculate for July, it tells us here that the raw materials inventory at the end of the month needs to equal 20% of the next month's materials. So I'm telling you the next month's materials is 10,300, and we want it to be 20% of that. So I'm going to put in a formula here that calculates 10,300 times 20%. And I see that my budgeted ending inventory for July needs to be 2,060. And you'll see the underline again. So here, to get my total materials requirement, I'm going to add these two together, the materials needed and the ending inventory needed. So I see here that my total material requirement in units for the month of July is 10,300. Now, we have the same concept happening here again, where we need to back out last month's ending inventory out of the equation, okay? So here it tells us that the June 30th raw materials inventory was 4,600 units. So let's back that out, and that tells us, I put it in as a negative, so I'm just going to add these two together. That tells me that the amount of materials that need to be purchased for the month of July are 5,760 units. Now, I need dollars. I'm doing a budget here, so I need to actually get this to a dollar value. I need to move away from the units and put it into dollars. So my material price per unit, I will find that here in my assumptions, where it says raw materials cost is $7.75 per unit. And again, I will perform multiplication to come up with the dollar amount. So it's telling me that my total cost of direct material purchases is going to be $44,640. Continued in the same process for August and September. You'll also see that I've given you some check figures here in the workbook, in your workbook. So thank you.